In my hometown of Mankato, Minnesota, between Front Street and the Minnesota River, there once stood a granite monument. The monument read simply, "Here were hanged 38 Sioux Indians, December 26, 1862. I was one of many local kids, both fascinated and horrified by a sketch of the execution scene that hangs on a wall in our county historical museum. The sketch shows a crowd gathered around a large oak scaffold. Soldiers, 1,400 according to reports, encircle the scaffold. Beyond the soldiers are thousands of spectators. The doomed Indians stand in a circle on the scaffold's platform. Each wears a white muslin covering and a noose. The sketch depicts the largest mass execution in the history of the United States. The execution marked the end of the most painful chapter in Minnesota's history, the Dakota conflict of 1862. It also marked the end of a strange legal process, On August 17th, a keg containing $71,000 in gold coins arrived by stage in nearby Fort Ridgely. Officials planned to distribute the coins to Dakota the very next day. It turned out to be one day too late. Because on that very day that the coins were reaching Fort Ridgely, the event that sparked the war happened some 40 miles to the north. 4 young Dakota men, hungry and looking for food, were on a hunting excursion near a settler's homestead. The hunt took a sickening turn after the men decided to attack the homestead. When it was all over, 3 white men, 1 white woman, and a 15-year-old girl lay dead. The 4 men returned to their camp near the Lower Sioux Agency that night. Their tale caused feverish debate. The book Through Dakota Eyes includes Chief Big Eagle's account of what happened when the men visited the home of Chief Little Crow. Little Crow sat up in bed and listened to their story. He said war was now declared. Blood had been shed. The payments would be stopped. And whites would take dreadful vengeance because women had been killed. Big Eagle reported that he and others, quote, talked for peace, but no one would listen to us. And soon the cry was, kill the whites. A council was held and the war was declared. Parties formed and dashed away in the darkness to kill the settlers. In the first bloody phase of the war, under the loose direction of Little Crow, the Dakota massacred farm families. Now, to understand the intense desire of Minnesotans for swift and terrible justice in the trials that followed the conflict, we need only look at what happened in one settlement near the reservation on August 18, 1862. 15 to 20 Dakota, carrying knives and hatchets, descended on the farmhouses of Milford. At each house, they gained entry by going to the front door and asking for water. Once inside, the killing began. At one family homestead, they killed an entire family of 6, including 4 children aged 2 to 8. The warriors disrobed the bodies of 2 of the girls, and they decapitated one of them. The attack in Milford resulted in the deaths of 53 settlers, including 20 children. Not a single Dakota warrior died in the attacks. Similar indiscriminate killing of whites occurred elsewhere. In all, an estimated 250 whites died in the first 3 days of fighting. The majority were women and children. Killing whites, the Dakota decided, was as easy as killing sheep. Now, massacre is a loaded word. I do not use it lightly. Yet by any measure, these killings by Dakota warriors were just that, massacres. To be fair, what the Dakota did to white Minnesota settlers was no different than what they often had done to their hated enemies, the Ojibwe, who occupied the forested lands just to their north and east. When Dakota went to war, they considered anyone on the other side fair game. Not all war parties, however, killed indiscriminately. Some of the Dakota chose to take women and children captive rather than killing them. Who lived and who died turned on the whims of individual warriors. The Dakota also attacked and looted the Lower Agency, home of the hated trader Andrew Myrick. Big Eagle reported that when he arrived at the agency, he found Myrick dead on the ground, his mouth stuffed with grass. The attack sent panicked settlers fleeing eastward. Whole counties on the frontier depopulated. Whites held on only in the barricaded fortifications at Fort Ridgely and the town of New Ulm. And in both the fort and the town, they were under siege. The Dakota attack on New Ulm left most in a town defended by local residents is truly a battle. Generally, we do not think of warriors or soldiers who participate only in battlefield actions as murderers. That is what warriors do. On the other hand, we usually treat the indiscriminate killing of civilians differently, consider it a war crime, punishable under the law. The trials, and there were 392 in all, came in 3 batches. First up in the first batch was Joseph Godfrey, the son of a French-Canadian father and an African-American mother. He faced charges of, quote, killing 7 white women and children, more or less peaceable citizens of the United States. Unlike most criminal trials, where the prosecution presents its case first, the court called Godfrey himself as the first witness. Going first is worst. It locks in testimony and opens up the defendant to countercharges from people he implicates. Godfrey, in what the trial recorder described as a voice of most marvelous sweetness, testified that he was mowing hay when approached on horseback by a gun-toting Dakota warrior. Apparently, the warrior did not know what to make of the dark-skinned Godfrey. With his gun cocked, the warrior told Godfrey the Dakota were out to kill whites. In Godfrey's words, he asked me which way I would go. Godfrey claimed he decided to go with the Indians out of duress. I have my wife and children I didn't want killed. Godfrey and the warrior joined up with a large group of Indians at a creek about a mile from Godfrey's house. And there the warriors insisted that Godfrey change from pants into breechcloth and put on war paint. Godfrey joined in various battles and in massacres, and he testified about all of them. He provided detail. For example, he told the court that at one settler's house, his war party found the table set for a family dinner. Spying the table, a warrior told Godfrey, "After we kill, we'll have dinner." Godfrey named names. For example, he identified a Dakota who knifed an old man and then cut him all to pieces. He named another who shot a woman and then kicked and killed her children. The question for the military commission was whether Godfrey acted as a willing participant or whether he did what he did just to save his own life. Godfrey admitted driving wagons for the Dakota warriors. He admitted seizing horses. He admitted being present at massacres. He even admitted firing shots in the assault on New Ulm. But the one thing that Godfrey did not admit to was murder. Godfrey claimed to have been always a reluctant warrior. 6 prosecution witnesses testified against Godfrey. They included a woman held captive by the Dakota who described Godfrey as whooping around and happy with the Indians. Another former captive testified, "He appeared to me to be with the Indians and to act as they did." Most damningly, the father of a mixed-race friend testified that Godfrey bragged about killing 7 men. He never told me he was forced into it. The military commission voted to sentence Godfrey to death. At the same time, however, they cited his valuable testimony and information in their recommended commutation of his sentence to imprisonment for 10 years. None of the other 300-plus defendants the commission was sentenced to death received such a recommendation. The pace of trials sped up after Godfrey's troubling case. In the first batch of 29 trials, most prisoners received death sentences, but 6 received acquittals. The commission was not just a conviction mill. It insisted on at least some credible evidence of guilt before convicting. On the other hand, we should observe that the bar for conviction was low. Consider, for example, that the last batch of 253 trials took place over 10 days. Now, that's a rate of more than 25 trials per day. Soldiers escorted the defendants into court in manacled pairs, 8 at a time. Now, how could the trials move so quickly? Well, essentially, it's because for the commission, mere participation in a battle justified a death sentence. In about 2/3 of the total cases, prisoners admitted firing shots. And you can imagine why. They simply did not understand that their admissions could cost them their lives. In all these cases, the commission proceeded to a guilty verdict in a matter of minutes. In doing so, the commission was merely following orders. Colonel Sibley directed judges, once they were satisfied the defendant had voluntarily participated in the war, to convict, and to convict on double quick time. General Pope, who would review the commission's verdicts, also made no secret of his feelings. He declared that any Dakota should be executed who was guilty of any sort of complicity in the late outrages. Dead settlers cannot testify. Most of the whites who survived the war had fled the area. The best witnesses for the prosecution turned out to be Joseph Godfrey and other so-called mixed breeds, to use the terminology of the era, who joined the forces with the Dakota under varying degrees of duress. Godfrey alone gave evidence in 55 cases and was single-handedly responsible for dozens of convictions. Recorder and judge advocate Isaac Hurd called Godfrey the greatest institution of the commission. Godfrey's testimony hurt most defendants, but it helped others. For example, when the commission tried a mixed-race person named Thomas Robertson, Godfrey testified, "I don't think Tom was a bad man. I believe he was forced to go." In another case involving a Dakota warrior named Chankata, Godfrey testified that when other Indians wanted to kill a white woman, this Indian saved her. In a third case, Godfrey testified that the defendant always gave good advice. He told the Indians that they should not cut the whites' heads off. In fact, in dozens of these trials, Godfrey played the role of a quasi-prosecutor. As Isaac Hurd put it, quote, "When a prisoner would state he was innocent, and Godfrey knew he was guilty, he would drop his head upon his breast and convulse with a fit of musical laughter." Hurd explained that when the commission asked Godfrey to talk to the defendant, he would often force the Indian, by a series of questions in his own language, into an admission of truth. Consider trial number 366, the trial of a Dakota named Hay-P. Hay-P, in his testimony, claimed to have had a lame arm at the time of the raids. He told the court that his gun was defective and could not fire. Then Godfrey took over. "Why don't you tell the court the truth?" he asked. "I saw you go and take the gun of an Indian who was killed and fire 2 shots, and then you borrowed mine and shot with it." Faced with Godfrey's accusations, Hay-P backed down. "It is true what Godfrey says," he admitted. The commission sentenced Hay-P to death. Remarkably, not a single defendant offered an alibi after Godfrey placed them at the scene of a shooting. Not a single defendant claimed that Godfrey had identified the wrong man. In the end, the commission sentenced 303 defendants to be hanged by the neck until dead. 20 defendants got prison terms of 1 to 5 years. The commission found the remainder of the Indians not guilty. Let us consider briefly the fairness or lack of fairness of these trials. This was a one-of-a-kind set of trials. The usual protections of the criminal procedure that are available to defendants in civil courts were not enjoyed. number. Lincoln's handwritten list included 39 names. Joseph Godfrey would live. So in the end would one other defendant, who was reprieved at the 11th hour. The final toll would be 38. In his report to the Senate, Lincoln explained his decision. He was, he wrote, anxious to not act with so much clemency as to encourage another outbreak, nor with so much severity as to be real cruelty. On a sunny December morning in Mankato, the 38 condemned men walked to the gallows with dignity. They sang death songs in unison as they climbed the scaffold stairs. At the signal of 3 drum beats, a survivor of the massacre swung an axe. The swing cut the rope that supported the platform on which the Dakota stood, with nooses around their necks. The platform dropped. For a moment, the crowd was silent. Then a loud huzzah rose from the estimated 5,000 spectators. Soldiers buried the Dakota bodies in a mass grave near the Minnesota River. At nightfall, a local doctor came to collect cadavers from the site. The doctor was William Mayo, the father of 2 physicians who founded the Mayo Clinic. Little Crow, the chief who led the warriors into battle, was not among the executed. He fled after the fighting to present-day North Dakota. In June of 1863, however, he returned to Minnesota, and in July he was picking berries with his son when a settler shot and killed him. But even beyond all this loss of life, we should note one other tragic consequence of the Dakota conflict. In April of 1863, Congress enacted a law providing for the forcible removal from Minnesota of all Sioux. The conflict continued. Only in 1890, in Wounded Knee, South Dakota, did the generation of warfare finally end. In my hometown today, the old granite monument is gone. In its place is a large limestone statue of a bison. The site of the 1862 execution has been renamed Reconciliation Park. Each December, scores of members of the Crow Creek Sioux tribe ride on horseback from their South Dakota reservation to Mankato to commemorate the mass hanging. Many non-Indians, some with ancestors who died in the Dakota War, join them. When I consider the Dakota trials, my thoughts keep turning to Abraham Lincoln and to a visitor he hosted in the White House in the fall of 1862. Lincoln's visitor was Henry Whipple, the Episcopal Bishop of Minnesota. Whipple pushed Lincoln to champion more just and humane treatment of Indians. We can assume that Whipple talked with Lincoln about the Dakota trials. He probably influenced Lincoln's decision to spare so many lives. Of this meeting, Lincoln said that Whipple, quote, talked with me about the rascality of this Indian business until I felt it down to my boots. Lincoln suggested that once the Civil War was over, he would make better treatment for Indians a priority. Lincoln's comments leave us wondering, if not for a bullet from John Wilkes Booth, how much different, how much better might have been the history of U.S. Indian relations.